One snowy night in old Japan, 47 men stormed a mansion with one goal, to take down the man who ruined their master. They knew it meant their own end, and they did it anyway. What could drive nearly 50 warriors to give up their lives in a single night of revenge? This is the real story behind the 47 Ronin, a legend built on loyalty, revenge, and myth. What really happened? What did the history books leave out? And why has this story gripped Japan for over 300 years? The year was 1701. Japan was under the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate. The country was finally at peace after centuries of war. The samurai class, once the masters of battlefield strategy, were now more like bureaucrats and guards. Their swords remained sharp, but their purpose had shifted. Lord Asano Naganori was one such samurai. He ruled a small domain called Ako. Though not powerful, he was respected and had deep pride in his honor. That pride would be his downfall. Asano was summoned to the capital, Edo, for a ceremonial duty, to host imperial envoys visiting the shogun. It was a formal affair, wrapped in etiquette and centuries-old customs. To guide him, the shogunate appointed a senior official named Kira Yashinaka. Kira was everything Asano wasn't. He was slick, political, and knew how to work the system. Some said he expected gifts, bribes, really, from those he mentored. Asano refused. Whether out of stubbornness or principle, he wouldn't play the game. What happened next remains debated to this day. Was it months of insults and quiet humiliation that pushed Asano over the edge? Or a single moment of provocation? On a spring morning inside Edo Castle, surrounded by guards, scribes, and fellow nobles, Asano snapped. He drew his short sword and attacked Kira. Blood was spilled. But Kira survived. Asano's fate was sealed the moment he drew his weapon inside the shogun's palace. The punishment was swift and absolute. That same day, he was ordered to take his own life. His lands were seized. His house abolished. His samurai became masterless, Ronin. Among those left behind was Oishi Kuranosuke, Asano's chief retainer. He knew the rules. The law had spoken. Retaliation would mean death. But law is one thing. Honor is another. Oishi saw something many missed. Kira not only survived, he thrived. He received no punishment. He returned to his life of wealth and influence, untouched. To the men of Ako, this wasn't justice. This was betrayal. In the months that followed, the Ako samurai scattered. Some left for other jobs. Others faded into quiet lives. But a small group of 47 men stayed connected. They met in secret. They watched. They planned. Oishi became the center of it all. To fool the authorities, and Kira himself, he played a part. He moved to Kyoto. He drank. He gambled. He let his beard grow wild. People laughed at him. Called him a disgrace. But it was all an act. While Oishi played the fool, the rest of the 47 gathered intelligence. They watched Kira's mansion. Studied its defenses. Learned the guard routines. The plan took over a year to set. Every man knew what it meant. Success would bring honor. But it would also bring death. On a freezing night in December, the 47 Ronin moved through the streets of Edo. They wore black. Carried concealed weapons. They split into two teams, one to attack the front gate, the other to scale the back wall. Inside, Kira was asleep. The mansion was guarded, but not prepared for what came. The Ronin struck fast. Silent. Efficient. They disabled the guards. Searched room by room. Kira had hidden himself in a shed. He was dragged out, trembling. Oishi gave him a choice, die with honor, or die by their hands. Kira couldn't do it. Oishi carried out the sentence. The Ronin then washed Kira's head, wrapped it in cloth, and marched across the city in silence. At dawn, they arrived at the grave of Lord Asano. There, they offered the head to their master. Their mission was complete. They turned themselves in. The shogunate faced a dilemma. The Ronin had broken the law. But they had done so with honor, not for personal gain. Public opinion was on their side. They had become heroes overnight. After weeks of debate, the verdict came down. The 47 Ronin were ordered to end their own lives. Each man complied. They were buried beside their master at a small temple, Sengakuji. Their story became legend. But legend is not truth. What was real? The basic facts are confirmed by multiple sources. Asano did attack Kira. Kira lived. Asano was punished harshly. His men did avenge him. The Ronin did turn themselves in. And they were ordered to take their own lives. But the rest? The motives, the planning, the honor. That's where things get complicated. Some say Oishi was no hero, but a cunning strategist who knew how to shape a story. That the attack was less about honor and more about restoring the Asano name. That the Ronin weren't unified, but pressured into joining. Others say the story was molded by playwrights, turned into a romantic tragedy to entertain and inspire. The tale of the 47 Ronin became Japan's favorite legend because it said something about loyalty, sacrifice, and the cost of revenge. But legends are rarely simple. The year after the Ronin's act, something strange happened. Their story didn't disappear into silence. It exploded. Playwrights in Osaka and Kyoto rushed to adapt the tale. The most famous version, The Treasury of Loyal Retainers, hit the kabuki stage barely 2 years after the event. But it didn't name names. Censors forbade direct references to recent political events, so the names were changed, the setting was moved centuries back, and the details were altered. Still, everyone knew what it was. Why did this version catch fire? Because it gave the people what they wanted: action, tragedy, and the fantasy that justice could still win in a world ruled by cold power. Behind the scenes, the government didn't love the attention. The shogunate had tried to present the incident as an unfortunate but settled affair. These plays stirred the pot. But banning them entirely would have caused backlash. So they walked a careful line, tolerating the myth, as long as it stayed myth. Meanwhile, the real families of the 47 men had to live with the aftermath. Some were honored. Others were quietly disgraced. The truth had become a sideshow. Oishi became a symbol. But who was he really? Historians are divided. Some saw him as a master tactician who carefully calculated public perception. Others believed he was haunted, doing what he felt was right, knowing it would destroy his family and lead to his own death. He wasn't just leading warriors. He was leading actors in a deadly performance, one watched by all of Japan. Everything he did, his fall into drunken disgrace, his reappearance in Edo, the timing of the strike, was part of a show designed to send a message. And it worked. But the story didn't end with the grave. In the decades that followed, the story of the 47 Ronin became more than a tale, it became a mirror. Politicians, writers, and philosophers all saw what they wanted in it. One generation praised them as models of honor. Another warned of blind loyalty leading to ruin. Books were written. Plays adapted again and again. Statues were raised. Their graves became shrines. Tourists still walk among those stones at Sengakuji, some leaving coins, others bowing in silence. But as time passed, the truth got harder to see. What began as a messy, real event slowly morphed into a perfect story. Edges were sanded down. Disagreements were erased. Motives were simplified. Heroes stood taller. Villains became more cartoonish. And in doing so, Japan didn't just remember the 47 Ronin, it reshaped them. For a class that was losing power, the story of the Ronin was a gift. It reminded people of the ideal samurai, brave, loyal, self-sacrificing. But real samurai in the 18th and 19th centuries were often administrators, not warriors. The legend gave them an identity to cling to. Even during the Meiji Restoration, when the samurai class was abolished, the story still held weight. Japan was modernizing fast, looking westward, but the image of the noble Ronin served as a cultural anchor. It was no longer just a story, it was part of the national soul. In World War II, the tale was used for propaganda. Soldiers were told to follow the example of the 47 Ronin, to give all for duty, to never question orders, to embrace sacrifice. But that's the danger of myth. It can inspire, but it can also be twisted. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the story of the 47 Ronin moved beyond books and stage plays and into the world of film and television. Japan's film industry adapted the tale numerous times, each with its own flavor, some playing up the tragedy, others focusing on the action. International audiences first encountered the tale through these films. Some were gritty and slow-burning, showing the tension and sacrifice. Others took more creative liberties, turning the Ronin into larger-than-life heroes. In 2013, Hollywood released its own version, one starring Keanu Reeves. It added monsters, magic, and a love story. To historians and traditionalists, it was almost unrecognizable. But to a new audience, it introduced the legend in a form shaped for fantasy rather than fact. This raises a question: does changing the story for entertainment destroy its meaning, or help keep it alive? In modern Japan, the 47 Ronin are no longer just historical figures. They're icons. Their story appears in manga, anime, novels, political speeches, even video games. The grave site at Sengakuji remains a destination for both tourists and locals. Some come out of respect. Others out of curiosity. All find themselves standing in front of stone markers that once held the weight of real human decisions. In politics, the tale has been used both to promote unity and to warn against extremism. One side sees the Ronin as examples of what it means to stand for principle. The other sees them as a reminder of how loyalty, when taken too far, can lead to destruction. No matter how it's used, the story refuses to die. Because at its heart, the legend asks a timeless question. When the law fails you, do you still follow the rules, or follow your own code? It might seem strange, but we actually know quite a bit about the 47 Ronin thanks to the bureaucratic nature of the Tokugawa era. There are court records, official documents, letters, even contemporary witness accounts. But the problem isn't the lack of information, it's what people choose to do with it. The facts are often less romantic than the legend. Oishi didn't make grand speeches. The Ronin weren't all brave heroes. Some were reluctant. Some tried to back out. At least one reportedly had doubts right up to the end. Even their final act, the night raid, wasn't exactly a samurai-style duel. It was a carefully planned home invasion carried out against an older man with minimal resistance. Strategic, yes. But not quite the noble battle many films suggest. What's clear, though, is that they were committed. Once the plan was in motion, they saw it through. Not because they believed in blood, but because they believed in balance. Kira humiliated their master and walked free. That imbalance had to be corrected, even if it cost them everything. History hasn't been kind to Kira Yoshinaka. In most versions of the story, he's the villain. Corrupt. Cowardly. A man who demanded bribes and insulted a good lord. But the records don't fully support that picture. Kira was part of an elite ceremonial class that handled court rituals and protocol. He was meticulous, proud, and perhaps difficult to deal with, but he wasn't uniquely cruel. In fact, there's evidence he mentored other lords without issue. So why the hatred? Because every story needs a villain. Kira may have been pompous, maybe even arrogant, but he was also the survivor of an ambush. And when he died, he hadn't committed a crime. He was, in the eyes of the government, a civil servant doing his job. That doesn't excuse everything. But it adds depth. And depth is often what legends lack. What makes the story of the 47 Ronin so lasting isn't just what happened, but what it makes people feel. For some, it's a story about justice. For others, it's about loyalty. For still others, it's about how systems fail, and individuals take matters into their own hands. It raises uncomfortable questions. If doing the right thing means breaking the law, what do you choose? If society says to stand down, but your soul says to act, who wins? These aren't just old questions. They're eternal ones. The Ronin may be long gone. But the debate they left behind is still alive, just like the snow that falls, every winter, on the quiet graves of 47 men who chose honor, even when it cost them everything. As the age of the samurai faded, their image was reborn, not on the battlefield, but in the classroom, the factory, and the modern home. During Japan's rapid modernization in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the samurai spirit was redefined to serve a new purpose. Gone were the days of armored warriors on horseback. In their place rose the idea of the salaryman, the soldier, the student, all expected to show discipline, obedience, and self-sacrifice. And at the center of this new ideal stood the 47 Ronin. Their story was used in schools to teach loyalty. It was cited by military leaders to inspire courage. It was carved into monuments to remind the public of Japan's core values, duty, honor, and endurance. But it also evolved beyond that. The word Ronin originally meant a masterless samurai, something pitiful, even shameful. But by the 20th century, that meaning started to shift. Artists, poets, and dissidents began using Ronin in a new way, not as outcasts, but as outsiders with integrity. People who refused to follow a broken system. Lone wolves with their own moral compass. The 47 Ronin were reimagined, not just as loyal servants, but as quiet rebels who stood up when no one else would. This version of the Ronin became a powerful symbol in pop culture. Anti-heroes in manga, more films, and crime dramas all borrowed from that template, the man with no master, no protection, just a sense of right and wrong. The Ronin legend didn't stay in Japan. In the West, the story became a touchstone for everything from classic samurai films to modern thrillers. Filmmakers like Akira Kurosawa brought the stoic, haunted samurai archetype to global audiences. Later, directors like George Lucas and Quentin Tarantino borrowed those elements and reshaped them into new myths. You can find echoes of the 47 Ronin in everything from Star Wars to John Wick. Lone warriors, haunted by loss, driven by a personal code, striking back against corrupt empires, it's all there. Even outside of fiction, the idea of the modern Ronin has taken hold. People who walk away from big corporations, who challenge unjust systems, or who live on their own terms have embraced the term, not as a curse, but as a badge of honor. While the 47 Ronin stepped into legend, their families had to face a different reality. Wives became widows overnight. Children became orphans. In a society where honor was everything, the families of the Ronin were not guaranteed safety or respect. Some were taken in by sympathetic relatives. Others faced quiet exile, their names whispered in the streets. For a few, the fame of the story brought protection. For others, it brought shame and isolation. The cost of loyalty, it turned out, wasn't just paid by the men with swords, but by everyone who loved them. Kira Yoshinaka was dead. But his family lived on. After the night raid, his household was ruined. Servants dismissed. Assets frozen. His name, though legally untouched, was culturally stained. Generations later, descendants of Kira still carry the burden. Some tried to change their names. Others leaned into the narrative, trying to defend their ancestors' side of the story. But it's hard to fight a legend. Even today, Kira's grave sits mostly ignored, while Sengakuji Temple, the burial place of the Ronin, is a place of pilgrimage. The people chose their heroes. Kira was not one of them. The Tokugawa shogunate had one job: maintain order. The Ronin incident was a failure of that system, an act of justice delivered outside the law. To preserve control, the government allowed the men to take their own lives with honor. But behind closed doors, the ruling class was uneasy. If one group of samurai could do this and be celebrated, what message did that send to others? It was a dangerous precedent. And yet, they couldn't stop the wave of public sympathy. The Ronin became martyrs, and their tale fed a hunger for meaning in a rigid world. The cost of that one act rippled outward, through households, through government chambers, and through the very soul of Japan. The graves of the 47 Ronin lie at Sengakuji Temple in Tokyo. Each year, especially on the anniversary of the raid, visitors line up to pay their respects. They light incense, bow their heads, leave offerings of coins, sake, and handwritten letters. It's not just tourists or history buffs. Locals come too, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. What brings them isn't just what the men did, but what they stood for. Their graves aren't just stone markers. They're symbols of sacrifice, conflict, and unbreakable resolve. All across Japan, statues and plaques mark places tied to the Ronin. A quiet lane in Tokyo where the men gathered. A gate once guarded by Kira's soldiers. Even the site of the original mansion has a commemorative stone. But perhaps the most powerful monument is invisible. It lives in the collective memory. The story of the 47 Ronin gets taught in schools, referenced in politics, and retold on screen. The names may change. The setting may shift. But the core remains, a group of people willing to give everything to right a wrong, even when the world said no. So what does the story of the 47 Ronin mean in today's world? Maybe it's a reminder that real honor isn't always clean. That loyalty can be a burden as much as a virtue. That the line between justice and revenge is often razor thin. It also reminds us that people don't become legends by being perfect. They become legends because their choices force us to question our own. The Ronin acted in a way that still sparks debate. Were they right? Were they fools? Heroes? Pawns? Maybe they were all of those things. But 3 centuries later, we're still talking about them. And that, more than anything, is proof that their story, flawed, brutal, unforgettable, still matters. The tale of the 47 Ronin is more than a historical footnote. It's a mirror. It reflects our struggles with duty, honor, and what it means to do what's right in a world that doesn't always reward it. Whether you see them as martyrs, rebels, or something in between, one thing is clear: their story isn't over. It lives on, in memory, in debate, and in every moment someone dares to stand up and say, "This is wrong. And I will make it right." Thank you for listening to this journey into history and legend. If you found it compelling, please like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Until next time, stay curious, and stay honorable.